Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week is going to be the turn of John Ellerby, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love and poetry. And John was part of the Waveney Clarion, which was a monthly paper that came out in the East Anglian region. And yes, ran mostly from the sort of early 70s into almost the mid-80s, and has recently put together a new publication called Clarion Calling, a short history of the Waveney Clarion from 1973 to 1984. I'll put a link in the notes below to the website where you can buy a copy. But anyway, you're going to find out more about John and all things Waveney Clarion in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. John, it's over to you.
Born slightly earlier than you, and so I'm a kind of 60s and 70s person, and that still resonates with me because it's formative years.
Yes.
And oddly enough, you talk about the music. My first music was people like the Shadows, who I absolutely worshipped at the time. But I was like, when I was 11 or 12 or whatever.
Yes.
And so on. And it was important. The connection to the Clarion really is one of an alternative culture, and it became a part of that in a very general sense. And then moved back to Suffolk and picked up on the Waveney Clarion.
Yes.
Which was already going. I mean, it'd been going since 1973. So when I became a part of it, it was an established and successful thing.
Yes. And where were you? Where did you grow up, by the way? What area in probably Britain were you born and raised?
I was born and bred in Suffolk.
Right.
And can occasionally drop into a Suffolk accent, but I'm not going to do it now.
No.
But I was born in a very small village called Waldringfield on the River Devon, and then moved to a smaller market town, Woodbridge, and then moved around a bit and ended up in London, I think, or Reading and then London.
Right.
So, a fairly normal background, but we kind of wanted, we wanted to get out of London. London was big and huge and, in a sense, oppressive to us. And we ended up, that's me and my wife, ended up in Suffolk. And we already knew about the Clarion. And that led us to the Barsham Fairs, which was an absolute revelation because it was people offering another way of looking at the world, which was we were sympathetic to and felt empathy for.
Yes. And did you grow up through that period of the 60s, which you sort of saw that transition from your love of the Shadows and probably other bands beginning with the letter S, the Searchers, I may guess, and sort of those beat bands to then that world of psychedelic rock and sort of the, Summer of Love in 67. Were you in London during that period, 67, 68?
67, yeah, I think I just moved from Cambridge to London in 67, oddly enough, and I can remember there was an extraordinary track called The Eve of Destruction, and there was also one called Did You Wear Flowers in Your Hair in San Francisco?
Oh, yes, we love that one.
That song, it may have been by Scott McKenzie. I am not any kind of music memorist, was absolutely magical to me because it summed up a way of looking at the world, although I think it was just a popular song. But I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, yes, it had a nice sentiment and innocence that 60, 66, 67 certainly had. I think it started getting a bit murky after that. Because I did an interview with Joe Boyd this week, because he's got a new book out, and he did White Bicycles, which was all about his 60s time. And he
Right.
talked a lot about that kind of, he started the UFO Club with John Hoppy Hopkins. And yes, and then
Is it,
it
was
was,
it the kind of, is that from John's Children?
no, that's a slightly
It was a
different thing.
white bicycle.
But the White Bicycle, that was a book. I don't know why people called it that. But he produced the first Pink Floyd single, and then he went on to work with people like the Incredible String Band and Nick Drake, and then started the record label Hannibal Records in the 80s. But again, he was very part of that kind of counterculture at the time. And International Times and Oz magazines were there. And I think he was part of International Times with Barry Miles and Hoppy Hopkins. Were you interested in those kind of publications during that time?
I sold IT on the streets of London.
Right.
I I have a belief, but I've never managed to find out if it's true, that I had a couple of record reviews published in it. But I have no evidence of that. I've just got a memory. And
Yes.
things were very vague at that time.
Well, they could be, yes, at that
But
time.
the International Times was a absolute major changer in, I think, in the way print publication was done and the way communication was affected. And you probably could say, although I haven't, Sandra Bell founded the Waveney Clarion in 72, I guess, that she come up with the idea. Whether she knew about the International Times, bound to have done.
Yes.
She didn't want to produce the International Times because it was a undoubtedly hippie thing, hippie, very alternative, very counterculture. What Sandra's idea for the Clarion was something which enabled like-minded people who had a slightly different perspective to communicate what they were doing and what else was going on around Suffolk and Norfolk. And that's what the Clarion was about. But
Yes.
also to do some of the stories which weren't necessarily appearing in the local press, like the Eastern Daily Press and the various Bungay Journal.
Yes. The Dis Express and East Anglian Times.
So it was, for me, it was formative, uh, that period. And there's not much you can, once it's there in your brain, it's hardwired, I guess.
Yes.
It's remained there. So
Did you go into any kind of major festivals during the 60s, very early 70s, or kind of happenings, as they like Indica books and sort of any sort of major performance art pieces? Were
uh,
they on your radar?
well, I mentioned John's Children because I think they did a song called "My White Bicycle,"
Mm.
and I think I saw them perform it at the Alexandra Palace 12-hour Technicolor Dream.
Oh,
And
that one. So you were at the Ali Pali and were there for
yeah,
the. Yes, I think it was
and
14
that
hour,
was when
but
I was living in Cambridge. This is extraordinary memories now. Thank
yes,
you for getting these out. I was living in Cambridge at that time and knew some people, and one of them knew a band, and that band was going to play at the Alexandra Palace, and they said, "Why don't you come with us?" And
yes,
so, entirely spontaneously, we piled into, it was either a transit or the equivalent of a transit, and went down to the Technicolor Dream. I had absolutely no idea what was happening, what was going on, and it was all very mysterious to me. But it was a possibly iconic moment in history because Pink Floyd were there, Soft Machine were there. There was just endless bands, music there,
yes.
and it was, and that might have been an International Times gig. I don't know, but it was
Yes.
an amazing event.
I think it was
So
a I think it was a fundraiser. I think they were having legal problems at
right,
the time.
yeah,
So, and I think John Lennon appeared. John Peel was there, and Susie Cream Cheese, who knows, she was one of those famous people on the scene.
yeah.
Yes, I think. And then Joe Boy told me there was two people called Susie Cream Cheese, which confused me. But because
Yeah,
one of them went on
I
to.
was completely. I had personally had absolutely no idea what was happening and or who people were. But I do claim to. I interviewed John Peel when I was editor of the Clarion, and because he appeared at our local college at Lowestoft College,
Right.
and was put on there, and I managed to get an interview. For me, it was a big deal.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean,
But
I guess
also
you'd have heard his the Perfume Garden, wouldn't you? Or you might have
Perfume
been.
Garden, and then it wasn't called Top Gear, but the one which was on the afternoon.
Yes, Top
The-
something, wasn't it? It might have been Top Gear, actually. But yes, I think that was when him and a few people from Caroline went over to the BBC.
Yeah,
Did you, I mean, you were of that age then, you would have sort of experienced and seen the 60s progress and change. What was it like at that point where, as it got to the end of the 60s and, people like Brian Jones died, and then you had Hendrix, Morrison, Joplin all dying, assassinations, kind of, the Manson moments. I mean, Manson wasn't in Suffolk, I know he was in California, but the bad acid and bad trips were taking their toll. What was it like going trundling into the 70s? Did it feel like the party had started well, went better, and then ended on a bit of a downer for you?
I am no person to ask for any kind of objective view of what was going on. When you're I was young. Oh, yeah, I was in my late teens, early 20s, and you're kind of buffeted from point to point, from time to time, and action to action. So I have no idea uh, what it was like. I can tell you that for me, the 60s really were in the early 70s. In other words, that people think of understanding of flower of love and peace, and the desire to connect to everybody and bring happiness to the world. That was my early 70s experience. And
Yes. Had you sort of tuned into the wonderful world of the Crank's cookbook or Crank's restaurant cafe and is it Seabrook who did a book on self-sufficiency? Did you start feeling like getting out of London and living off the land and possibly being in community or living in communities was
yeah,
important?
yeah, absolutely. I thought about it. Uh, but it's a hard thing to do. I'd lived in group flats, in group places, and uh, I knew how difficult it was to live with other people.
Yes.
But there was several communes when we arrived back in Suffolk. There were communes dotted about of varying types. But I
Yes.
never had any particular desire to do that. But there's always a feeling, self sufficiency is absolutely brilliant, and it is. But it's a hard thing to do. So
Yes, it's a serious
personally,
job.
we didn't do it. I
No.
managed to grow some vegetables, but that was about as far.
I know it's quite a
Yeah,
yeah, it's quite hard work. So with the Clarion, the Barsham Fair begins, isn't it? It's 72. Barsham Fair
yeah.
starts, and obviously the people who organised it had no idea where it was going to next. But having interviewed quite a lot of them, they had sort of got one of them had got the idea from going to California, hadn't he? I believe, and there was a big connection with the Lowestoft fisheries as well, which was quite an amusing story. Who knew
Oh
that
well,
was?
yeah. The certainly for the fairs again. We weren't here. I wasn't here. I don't know what happened. So this is all reported information. But
Right.
that's the general memory is that somebody, and I ought to know their name, was in California and they saw a fair there and they came back here. They're all sitting around, a group of people in a pub. Let's do it here, and they created Barsham Fair, a recreation of a medieval fair just outside Beccles in a field, and they did
Yes.
it. and they did it themselves. They did it by persuading farmers and persuading pretty much everybody that this is a good idea. A mad idea, of course, to put a lot of people in a field with no power, because no electricity, nothing. Everything had to be acoustic, and all got to dress up as medieval serfs. Bizarre. And it caught all sorts of people's imagination, and they turned up and engaged in it. They just became a part of it. So there were people there, presumably making leather wallets and banging drums, and odd people going around complaining about how they were oppressed, which they would have been at the time and were, and still are, of course. So, and it just captured a little piece of people's imagination, and made some money, and very unexpectedly, I think, from the organisers' point of view. And Sandra said, let's do a magazine.
Yes,
Let's
which
do
is
a monthly magazine. Let's keep this feeling going. Let's continue the kind of momentum we've got. And from that, the Clarion appeared, and a wonderful sort of 11 years ensued after that.
so was that 73 then, the Clarion sort of hit
73, February 73, the Clarion came out, first edition.
Yes.
Copies. There's a image in the book.
And was that? And did you have a particular team at that stage that were going to be the kind of the focus, or the editors and the sort of arts editors and the news editors? Was there? How did that sort of team get together?
Well, you can read all about it in the book, actually, in quite
Yes.
detail, because Sandra Bell writes about this as to how it actually happened, and it's a whole sequence of serendipity, effort, desire, and energy, which means that eventually a team as such appeared. But it wasn't. I don't think there was a kind of grand idea. Oh, we've got all the people. Let's do it. It was more like we need somebody to do some graphics. Can you do Yeah, I'm a graphics artist. I can do that. And or we need somebody to do some typing. Well, we can do typing. And as it happened, uh, there was a printer who literally lived down the lane from where Sandra and Andy were, and he had a printing press in his backyard. So
Yes.
they said, "Well, can you print this?" And they did. They printed it, and from that, and I think that much of the pleasure of the Clarion and its ensuing success was it was about people working together, collaborating, but never really being fully in control that these things were going to happen. They wanted them to happen. They tried to make them happen, and sometimes they did happen. So
Yes.
that was it's a good thing, and it's really, I think it's that aspect of it which makes me and us. We wanted to record that legacy of people working together collaboratively from all sorts of different backgrounds to produce something which connected people together.
Yes.
And it was a sort of self-sufficiency, but with a magazine.
Well, I guess you were, yes, in those days we had very few people had a landline in their house, and there was very little, communication was slow. So I guess this was kind of a way of being able to sort of bring that community together. And it was a bit of a zeitgeist, because the fairs were obviously starting, and no one realised it was going to have such a legacy and then develop into things like the Albion Fairs and lots of others. And then sort of having this publication kind of coincided with it. So how many? Was it a monthly or bi-monthly paper at first, or magazine?
It's always been monthly.
It's been monthly. My God, that must have been a lot of work in those days, actually
Yeah,
getting
it
it
was.
about.
It was a lot of work, and the production of it was pretty physical. So everything had to be printed up, typed up rather, on a piece
Yes.
of paper, then cut into columns and then pasted down on a big board. And illustrations, the same thing, pen and ink. It was basically black and white to start with. Had to be put in the right place, the right size. Photographs had to be done separately and given to the printer, and they photographed them in a different way and dropped them in. It was a technically relatively laborious process compared to what you or I could probably do now.
Yes. Was there a lot of crawling around on the floor, stapling things together as well? Then did you have to, or
And then,
folding
yeah,
things?
so basically you made up these big sheets, took them to the printer, and they did wonders. And our printers were always incredibly supportive of the Clarion. They kind of they bought into the idea and would use whatever paper they had hanging about, so it was cheaper for us, or and so on. But it was always good quality. But they would use offcuts and things like that.
Yes. And
And then they print it and they ring up, and it was all done on the phone. They ring up and say, "Come and get it," and you had to go over and you pick up all these sheets. Then they would go back to whoever was doing the collation, who was over the editor at the time, and they'd be put on a table or on a floor, and every sheet would be collected together, collated together, and then folded, and then it had to be distributed, and that was all done by people turning up and taking them away and taking them. We used to, at one point, they'd be put on a train and dropped off at Halesworth, and somebody from Halesworth would pick up the 25 copies or 50 copies and take them around the local shops and pubs. It was an
blimey.
extraordinary. Nobody's ever worked it out, and we have no way of knowing. But at one point, there must have been 50 people involved in the whole Clarion activity, with all the distributors, the writers,
Yes.
printers, and everybody. Incredible operation, and all done on the phone and with meetings in pubs.
Yes, that was an amazing labour of love. And can you remember any of the kind of circulation figures at those kind of points in sort of different years? Did you sort of say, gosh, yes, we printed hundreds there, then it went up to thousands, and then was there a curve from that sort of beginning period to that?
There will have been a curve. Nobody ever recorded things like this.
No.
It was, it was but when I was editor, they'd say, "How many do you want to print?" And it was mainly about, you'd think, okay, what are the stories we've got? So
Right.
during the summer months, when the fairs, especially the Albion fairs, this is when I was doing it, which is mid-period Clarion. You'd be thinking, okay, well, we've got all the fair stuff coming up. People want to know about that, so you're probably going to sell 1,500 copies if you're lucky. So that would be the sort of print run. Much lower, or down to 1,000 or something in the winter, when there's less public events going on, and therefore less reason for people to get hold of the
Yes.
magazine. One of its strengths was that it was a sort of listings magazine, but never called itself that, and that wasn't its main purpose. But people did find out when a Dunlop playing, oh, they're at Hoxton or they're in Geldeston or whatever, and
Yes.
that was the way they found out, because there was no other way.
No, absolutely. The trusty shop window was one thing, but actually, yes, you were the voice of the people. Did you? So when you came to Suffolk, or that part of Suffolk, and started getting involved, what year was that? When was your sort of period with the Clarion?
I came back to. I came back. We came back in '78. And in '78, I think I wrote my first article for the Clarion, and I became editor in the end of '79. And that was just serendipity, Don, who'd been previous editor, and he really knocked it into a kind of, well, he was called Captain Sensible, so it was put into a sensible production sense, and he gratifyingly said, do you want to be editor? And there was a bit, there was no election process that I remember,
No.
but presumably everybody within the collective, because it was called a sort of Clarion collective, never officially, but that's what it was, would have said, yeah, he can probably do the job. And so in end of 79, I became editor. Glorious a moment for me. I was so excited.
Well, yes. So before that, was Don the man who kept it together from the early years, 73 to 79? Was he kind of at the helm at that period?
So Sandra Bell was the editor and the founder and
Yes.
the instigator of the whole thing. She was the beginner, the beginning.
Yes.
And it did go through certain periods of having a revolving editorship and so on. So I think Don took over after took editorship after about 3 years. He did 3 years or 4 years possibly, and then I took over, and then after that, it was edited by a group of other people as well. So it just
Yes.
kind of went on. It was just passed on. Essentially, it was quite hard work producing it. Quite a lot of time was put in by the central group, and it became hard to keep going.
Well, yes, I know that it's like the honeymoon period is fantastic in anything, and those kind of late night conversations around the table with alcohol can make you feel very optimistic, can't they? And it's in the middle of winter when there's not much energy and you've got to keep it going. That's the kind of key, and that's the difference with a lot of people. I find a lot of, you get people who take the baton and will run with something, and people who have got a lot of comments but never actually step up. The spectators in the game of life, I call them. So yes, that's always quite an interesting one. And did you ever get any grant money for the Waveney Clarion? Did you ever get any East Anglian funding for that? There was a funding trust, wasn't there?
So far as I know, the only grant that the Clarion ever got was from Barsham Fair.
Right.
It wasn't Barsham Fair, it was from the East Anglian Arts Trust,
That's the key.
set up Barsham Fair and administered the funds which they produced. The East Anglian Arts Trust were an absolute major mover for many years in the cultural events of the area, and were very significant. And we do feature them in the book. So they were significant, but funding was always an issue. I mean, it was never like nobody was paid.
No, I could have.
It was
Because I
all
think, was it like 20p, 10p or 20p for a copy?
start off at 5p.
Oh, 5p, yes. Yes, you would have to have a lot of 5p's to make any money, wouldn't you, really, at that stage? And did Sandra, was that when she put another publication out, Build Another Barsham, was that just a side project that she did? It wasn't anything to do with the Clarion?
Well, it depends what you mean by anything to do. I mean, that's a brilliant book, that Build Another Barsham. And the Clare's Archive Fairs Archive
Yeah.
has produced a mini version of that. I just literally made smaller. And really, it stands up remarkably well as to how if you want to put on a community event, this is how you would do it.
Yes.
And the principles remain exactly the same. You've got to talk to people, and talking to people is absolutely crucial, because you've got to make sure people want to do it and understand why you want to do it, and then you're more likely to make it happen. Just imposing it, which is one of the perhaps differences from then and now, but imposing cultural things on people never really works. It needs to come from a group of people that believe that it's going to happen. And
Yes. It's always good, that little nudge, I guess they call it. And with the, obviously the Clarions, like the Barsham Fair, has kind of grown in its kind of, I don't know, mystique and sort of people just loving it. When did Mick Sparksman come with his coypu coypu control kind of cartoon. When did this kind of appear in the publication?
Right, from very early on, because he was, again, from Sandra's recollection, uh, she, she needed somebody to do the graphics, needed somebody to design the paper, and she'd met. It's quite a long story, and I'm not going to go into it because it is in the book, and people need to buy the book.
By the book, yes, indeed, yes.
But she asked Mick, said, "Will you do it?" And he said, "Yeah," and I'll do that. And she also said, all newspapers have a cartoon strip. We need a cartoon strip. Can you make one? And they, the Sparksmans, basically, I think anyway, came up with the idea of coypu, because
Yes,
they'd seen all these little vans running around saying coypu control,
this is true.
and Mick thought, well, we'll have a sort of coypu rebellion story, and that's where coypu came from, and it was absolutely integral to the success of the Clarion, having that very clever, very funny, and brilliantly drawn cartoon strip, which in the end contained many other characters. Sandra was absolutely right. It was a big part of the success of the Clarion, especially, well, all the way through, actually. There was no special about it.
Mm.
So yeah, Mick was there and produced this from his energetic and fairly wide-ranging brain.
Yes, well, it's quite beautiful. Did you so how connected was the Clarion to the Barsham Fair, and when that finished in the mid-70s, and then obviously then other people started putting on fairs. How did that change the kind of feeling of the Clarion and the team, and sort of, and most people have kind of energy for sort of projects like this for 3 to 5 years, and then they kind of need to move on, or they burn out, or they fall out, heaven forbid. But anyway, how did that kind of transition feel for people who were in it at the time?
Well, I think by the time the last Barsham 76 had come along, the Clarion was well established as an independent way of communicating with people. It had a readership, it had a system of distribution, it had writers, but even by that, well, not even, it almost instantly was able to contact writers who either went on to or already had been quite successful, and they either got interviews with them or they wrote pieces for it. It was an established local magazine, and so when Barsham Fairs called it a day, and they did that essentially because it got so big, so successful, that it was very hard to manage on any kind of ad hoc basis. People would have had to be working full time, etc., for the whole year. And they just thought, oh, we can't keep on doing this. But out of that came the notion of Albion Fairs, which essentially was to offer a kind of a package and say to people, if you want to do a fair in your local community, we can help you with the organisation, the design, and to a degree with a crew who can help you set it up. So that part of it was fairly painless, I would imagine. It would have been slightly before my time when we came. So we came in 78, but 79 was our first Albion experiences. The Albion Fairs appeared to be already going well, and they were a major part of the Clarion's stories, because they
Yes.
see who's on, when's it happening. But it was never focused entirely around the fairs, but obviously they were quite important to it. but it was more about the concept that we need to communicate the things which are not being communicating elsewhere. At that time, the mainstream media was probably less open to stories than it is now, where we got multimedia, and you can just do a piece on the internet, and if you're lucky, somebody will pick it up and it'll become distributed. Then it was quite hard work to get a story about housing or disabled. The Clarion was very strong on minority groups, and therefore it had a column on the problem or the excitements and problems of being in any way disabled in this area at that time, well before that was picked up by the locals mainstream.
Yeah.
So it had an established reason for being there, and it continued, and the fairs were a part of that. But it was never just the fairs.
No.
Fairs happened in 3 months of the year. Clarion went for 12, and it covered pretty much every subject you can imagine. And in some ways, it was quite prescient because it was very, very interested in ecological things, the environment. It was very interested in nuclear power and what that meant, but it wasn't entirely against nuclear power, but it probably was in the end.
So you had Sizewell.
And so the stories about Sizewell C now, if you look at the old magazines, they were all in the Clarion, but about Sizewell B.
Yeah.
The same arguments, and exactly the same increasing costs, which we're now seeing in front of us from Sizewell C.
I know. And did that, because you mentioned, that 60s ethos that a lot of the original people who did the Barsham Fairs have, and yourself, as you mentioned, if you're going to San Francisco, then obviously as different youth movements happen, and said the 70s had, prog rock and yacht rock and the kids, sensitive singer-songwriters, heavy metal, and then we had punk rock. Did those kind of different movements, did that have much impact on the kind of the general kind of the interest of the Clarion? Did it sort of pick up sort of new readers, or did it seem a little bit like you were in a different era at times?
A good question, and I, in truth, I have absolutely no idea whether it did or didn't. From a personal point of view, and of course, personal point of view is it was central to the way the Clarion operated, so you're allowed to have a personal point of view. But,
Yes.
But the music that it reported on, was interested in, or tended to be slightly left field. Not the band, obviously, but
Good point.
that hadn't even existed.
They haven't even, they weren't even born.
but along those sorts of sides. But it would go. What it liked really wasn't so much particular genres of music or what it supported, but it was live music. It was doing things live in front of people. So there wasn't just music. There were loads of gigs put on, because that was one of the ways the Clarion kept itself going, was put on a gig, raise a bit of money, and so they were benefit gigs really.
Yes.
And so in village halls right round Suffolk, and to a degree in Norfolk, we'd do that. But also theatre. It was a big supporter of street theatre, a bit minor theatre, and at one point it had a coypu Clarion travelling circus, and that went round village halls, and that was a kind of Christmas pantomime. I never saw it. It's before my time. I wish I had.
Well, yes.
In fact, there were many things which happened in the early years that never saw and wish I'd been at, because I suspect that they were pretty mind-blowing experiences.
Well, yes.
So, but I think it was about always live. It was all about people doing it, just doing it, and the Clarion was the way you could publicise you were doing it, and that was what its purpose was. That's what Sandra set it up for. If you're doing something, let us know. We'll talk about it. If you're worried about something, tell us about it. We'll write about it. And for that reason, for 11 and a quarter years, it was exceptionally successful when it comes to these things. And in the kind of gamut of, because it was a time also, the whole around Britain, of radical magazines. It was the Clarion wasn't alone, but it was quite different because it was rural, and because it wasn't overtly political in the sense of it wasn't socialist worker, it wasn't Labour Party, it wasn't Trotskyist, it didn't have those kind of labels.
Mm-hmm.
It was about, this is what people are concerned about, this is what we'll try to write about, this is what we'll try to find somebody who knows about it to talk about, whatever the subject is. And therefore it appealed to a slightly broader audience, because it wasn't entirely political.
No.
By any means, it was not entirely. It wasn't even 50%.
Yes, and so you were the editor. Did you say 79 to? Was it 79 for 3 years?
79 to 81.
Right, so that was quite a period, wasn't it? Because at that time, Thatcher gets in 79. Then we have the Falkland War, the miners' strike, Greenham Common. Did you feel, as you had sort of had so much experience in the 80s, obviously the 70s, did you feel that the 80s was quite a different feeling for you and the publication, and what was kind of happening politically at that time?
I did. When I became editor, I thought, I'm going to make this more. We need to attack some things. This was what I wanted to do. I'm not entirely. I certainly didn't succeed at it. But my first front page was about the National Front in having a meeting in Yarmouth, and the headline was "Wake Up, Waveney," because there was a strong movement towards the right at that point. And I did continue to try to, and I have to say, having read some of the articles that I either asked people to write or wrote myself, but mainly the ones I wrote, were incredibly detailed and exceptionally boring. But they were about important things, and
Yes.
so I tried to explain about cruise missiles and. I was, as an individual, and it is a power of the editor, I was able to indulge in saying, these things are important, you should jolly well listen.
Yes.
But they'd only ever take up a fifth of the paper. The rest of it was about, where can you gig, what's the good beer, what do you do on your allotment, and so on, the kind of more useful things than trying to make sense of the world.
Yes, absolutely. And what was the reason? Did you feel, for your period as the editor, did you feel like it was time to go? Did you, was there any particular reason that you stepped down when you did?
Yeah, I'd been doing it for 3 years, and I was beginning to get quite a lot of work as a teacher, because that's what I trained to do 10 years before. And I was beginning to get work as a teacher. And I also I thought there was a possibility we could make the Clarion into an enterprise which might pay for itself,
Mm-hmm.
making it into a semi-commercial activity, and that didn't really get any legs. I was unable to persuade the collective that it's a good thing. but oddly, that is only my perspective. I mean, I really, when we were producing the book, and three of the people who were producing the book we've got, Clarion Calling, three of those people were heavily engaged in the Clarion and enormous connections. So Don, Mike, and myself. And we had different recollections about what happened at different points and how this thing occurred and what was the next steps that we should or could have taken. So when I say that's one of the reasons I wanted to do that, couldn't persuade people. But mainly it's like 3 years putting in, I don't know, 80 or 90 hours only in a month, but if you're working as well, that's a considerable input of time.
That's your weekends gone.
So
yes.
I think probably I was just tired.
Frazzled. Sometimes frazzled and a bit sort of, yes, I know. It's all, we've all been. You could. So on that, because you've got this fantastic website as well, there's the letter, isn't there, which is announcing, and this is done by Don Matthews, isn't it?
Yeah.
So was he back on the team again when the Clarion decided to call it a day?
He never really left. Don has been since he became engaged with the Clarion. Never really left, but he's definitely left Lowestoft, but he's not left connections with it.
So was 38 Reeve Street his house?
Yeah.
Right. So there you go. They should have a blue plaque, really, shouldn't they, on that? So what was the Clarion like in its last few years? Did you have a sense that it was going to finish during the sort of 84?
Yeah. It became, in a sense, the kind of team, and you use the word right at the beginning, that word team. We never thought of ourselves as a team, but that's essentially what it was. Started to come back together again to think how can we keep the old goal going, and so we became involved in it, but it just ran in once it was debts, printers' debts, basically. And
right.
once you, as with anything, once your debt reaches a certain level, you never have any ability to recoup that getting off back to pay off that debt. So
yes.
It was necessary to call a halt, and because we couldn't find, Ed Sheeran, unfortunately, didn't exist then.
Not even born.
We would have gone straight to him now, said, give us a grand, because it's probably a relatively small amount of money.
Yeah. Did it feel a little bit like, because I know Richard Barnes had brought his classic book out, The Sun in the East.
Yeah.
I think that was coming out at that time when the fairs were sort of not doing terribly well, weren't they? There were certain issues. Organisers had sort of had their day. There was also the Create Peace Convoy, which was, having interviewed quite a few of the organisers, would begin to people's kind of like, actually, I can't do this anymore. I'm not signing up. Did it just feel like that was the end of the party, so to speak? That, no one, I mean, I'm sure Richard didn't expect at that point that the fairs were going to kind of almost finish at some point quite quickly after that. Did it also feel like that energy, that cosmic vibration that you all had, did it feel like it was coming to a bit of an end anyway?
I suspect so. I mean, I think it is about it's the energy coming from a certain group, and that group can be absolutely huge, like they won't necessarily even know each other or be aware of each other, but collectively it has an energy, and everybody moves through that wave, and then the wave dissipates,
Yes.
of life. and I think that without being able to get actually people who bought into the notion of the Clarion to take it over in some way, then yes, it was getting towards the end. And it'd be the same with the Albion Fairs, although I had not much to do with the Albion Fairs being put on or whatever. I used to go to them and have stalls there and things, but I wasn't a part of the Albion Fair group. I think that, yeah, the energy goes and the desire goes, and also the notion that we've been here, we've done this. Why doesn't somebody else do it?
Mm.
And one can feel that feeling in pretty much every community enterprise there is. And it's very, very hard to sustain
Yeah.
an activity. Locally, we have a thing called the East Anglian Museum of Transport, which it was initially started in 1973 with one guy saying, I've got a tram or something. And it took a long time for him to get it off the ground, to get people interested. And now, 50 years later, it's actually a part of the whole tourist enterprise of Suffolk and Norfolk. It's a destination, and it seems like a real fixture.
Yeah.
But it came from somebody, a group of people saying, let's do this. But it was able to find enough people to keep on doing the same thing.
Yes. And when
Keep the same ideas, but develop them. I mean, they have. There's no way that I'm using them as an example because I think it's a magical thing. It's magical that they started off with such a small idea. We
yeah.
must keep this thing, and then let's show it to people, and then let's have a place to build stuff in, and then, oh God, now we've got 3 of them. Let's show those off more, and so on. And it just organically
Yes.
was created, and that's very unusual. And the Clarion, yeah, didn't unfortunately follow that path.
No, but then I suppose that mid-80s, everyone walked off in their separate directions, probably sort of with quite a lot of mixed emotions about everything, and getting to a certain age of homes, families, sometimes careers as well. Did you just kind of yourself, did your path just go into teaching and other projects at that point?
Yeah.
And when did you start sort of, because I've noticed I do another project show, which is basically based around the indie pop world of the 80s, that when it finished, it was the 90s, and to be honest, no one was interested in the 80s, and then a few more decades, still no one interested. And then quite recently, there's been much more interest, and I realised a passing of time does sometimes things a wonder, weren't there? There's that kind of intrigue and interest. Did you feel that with the kind of the first, the Barsham Fairs and the Albion Fairs, and then the Clarion, was there a little bit more traction as the years kept rolling by?
I think it's an overused word, but it's kind of legacy. The Barsham Fairs has got quite a lot of stuff to remember it by. It's got films, it's got slideshows. It's celebrated in Richard Barnes' Sun in the East book, brilliantly done, produced, I think, 1981, and it was one of the examples that I don't think we've kind of reached that same height, to be honest with you, but it was a good book and well worth looking for. But having that book means that it is there.
Mm-hmm.
The experience has been recorded, and it's in a printed version, and will have a legacy. It is the legacy of the fairs. And I think that we thought the same, that there is no real record of the Waveney Clarion and what it did and why it did it. There's no coherent record. Actually, I'm not saying that Clarion Calling is all that coherent, but it does try to be. And so I can't remember the sequence of events, but at some point somebody said, let's do a book. And then we realised we couldn't do a book in time, so we produced the Barsham special in 23, newspaper version of the Clarion, and said, okay, we'll do that, and then we'll do a book, because it took the pressure off us.
And who was involved with the book? Who's been sort of the driving force behind it?
Don Matthew, Mike Hammond, Pat Carter, and other three main people. Nina McGee has been a supporter of great importance, because she was forever saying, this is brilliant, this is great, this is wonderful, which kept us going a little bit. So it's Don Matthew, ex-editor and ex-everything for the Clarions, a major mover. Pat, who was a major part of the Clarion for a long time. Mike Hammond had designed it for a long time. And then Boren van Loon, who was writing at the beginning, has been significant as well, because he's part of the website. Mike Weaver of Barsham Fairs, although not part of the Clarion group, has been very supportive. So we just essentially had a lot of meetings, not very many of them in pubs, much to my disappointment, but
yes,
we needed to get work done. So
when did you start? When was the sort of moment that you suddenly, because Boren's website, that was quite a few years ago now, isn't it? Was it about?
Well, the website's been up for ages and ages, and that's a Boren van Loon / Mike Weaver activity. I don't know, it must be at least 2 years ago since we started on the book.
Yes, and did you?
Maybe even 2022, so it's 3 years ago.
Oh, right, okay. So
I think the first article that we asked people to write came in towards the end of 2022. Now, we didn't intend it to take so long, I can tell you that. It was supposed to be bang, 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 job done.
Done by Christmas.
Yeah, literally done by Christmas. And if you look at the various press releases that I put out, it'll say we expect to publish this at the end of the year. We expect to publish for the end of the middle of next year, and so it kept being pushed back. But that's because that was the release. That was the thing we had. We set the deadline.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, the deadlines arrived in the middle of August. Not the greatest time to launch a book. Everyone's on holiday, sun is shining, not necessarily a great time. But that's just the way it panned out.
Well, yes. Well, at least it's definitely ready for Christmas this year. So then, so that was quite nearly a 3-year project on getting this together. Sort of looking at it, are you? This is a bit of an obvious. Are you pleased with it? Have you can you look at it and think, thank God we took our time and it's does the job that you've all wanted?
Yeah, I certainly look at it and say, thank God it's done. Again, but because it's been a significant part of my life for a while, and so I am. I'm looking at it and sort of composing my thoughts slightly, because I feel a little bit emotional about it, in the sense that we've worked quite hard to produce it. We're all, one way or other, quite experienced in life. So we know it's not perfect, and we know that the team, the Clarion crew, are not going to find it perfect. We're going to look through this and say, oh, God, why didn't we do that? Oh, what? And then I think, well, it's an opportunity for a second edition.
Yeah,
when people tell us how to do it better, which they will, hopefully, we will just, because there are things missing. I know there are things missing. But it can't do everything. And we might do another one. We might do a totally digital one.
Well, sometimes people do an expanded, like a few years later, or like you've had. I guess you've now done it, so that's your kind of calling card. So you've proven that you've done it, and then someone goes, "Oh, now they've got it," even though you've probably told them and they've been thinking about it. Suddenly, we'll get motivated to suddenly get in touch and say,
Yeah,
"God,
our ideal would be that, because we're going to try to get it reviewed by national publications, because if we're okay, but it would be nice to get it reviewed.
well,
And then
yes,
what would the ideal be? That a publisher picks it up and says, actually, we could do something with that, because it resonates with that time, resonates very much with now. People at the moment are exceptionally worried with the kind of the fear that there is everywhere. You've got wars, you've got nuclear weapon fears, you've got nuclear power fears, you've got unstable leaders of nations, you've got a difficulty with people entering periods of considerable poverty and inequality. And that was the late 70s and 80s. And
and
tried to
climate
address them.
and these very hot summers and very mild
Yeah,
winters."
and yeah, summer of 76.
I know people bang on about that, but actually that was just a one-off, whereas now it's quite consistent.
It's not the same as now.
No.
And one of the interesting things looking at the Clarion stories is that nobody did. We didn't, although I think greenhouse warming was known about, we didn't have the concept of climate change and what was coming. It wasn't
Yes.
there. But there was a very big interest in protecting and conserving nature and the way we interacted with it, and that we should stop being so imperious about it and thinking that resources go on forever.
Yes.
So,
I think
in that sense, it was quite prescient, and I would like people to recognise that what they're fearing now is not new. But then I was brought up, my childhood was in the 50s and 60s, and that was an equally unstable. You got the Suez crisis, then the Cuban crisis. I can remember people being absolutely scared witless that we were all going to die in a nuclear war.
well, you also had Vietnam as well, don't forget.
And then along comes Vietnam.
And quite a few assassinations as well in America. So that
So,
didn't go.
it's like no decade is particularly
No.
wonderful. But the significance, I think, is trying to solve the problems. And the Clarion tried to solve problems. It tried to take that view. We've got a problem, let's try to solve it. But it did identify it as well.
Yes. So with the book, it's not a print on demand, is it? It's you printed up the copies,
Limited edition.
a limited edition. And if the customer goes to the website, this is waveneyclarion.co.uk, and is this the best place and the only place at the moment to get a copy?
Pretty much, yeah. It's being published right now for £15, and it will remain £15 until the 23rd of August.
Right.
That it becomes £19.95. So it's a bargain right now. No postal packing. The only way we can do that is not to put it into bookshops, because they want 30-40%.
Yes.
And we can't. We would have to sell it at £19.95, really.
Yes.
So at the very least.
So how many copies have you had printed, by the way?
We've had 200.
Right. Oh, actually, that's a good, because printers often throw that moment where you have a number and they go, for a little bit more, you could have more books, but they're the extra ones are the ones that sit under your bed for a few years, and then
I'm a spreadsheet man. I have done endless projections about what we need to do.
yes.
We're doing okay, and because because we need, frankly, if we don't get the money from selling it, we've got a printer's bill. This is like running the Clarion, you know.
Yes, I know.
You've got to sell the copies in order to pay the printer. But the printer, who's Anglian Print, are again magically supportive. They're a green company. They're a carbon neutral company, and everything is going to be absolutely hunky dory. But we don't have very many copies to sell. Quite a lot of them already gone. You reminded me, actually, I've got to put the limit up on our bookshop so it shows the numbers of copies left.
Yes, because otherwise people get complacent.
Yeah, exactly. They think, oh, I'll be able to get that later, and once it's gone, it's gone because it's not limited.
I'm still traumatized by missing one or two of those moments in life. I was complacent, and I thought, oh, I'll do it next month. Oh no, it's gone. No, it's gone. It's completely gone. And then it comes up on eBay for a ridiculous amount. You think, oh,
yeah.
So yes, people need to go out and buy it now, don't they?
Yeah.
Get out there. As Bob Geldof once said in 1985, give us your money, and then that'll be gone, and then at least you won't have any under your bed, sort of knocking about for years, will you? Oh well, I'm so pleased that it's happened, and I do. To be honest, God, this sounds confessional. I love archiving. I love these things where people get together and think, right, if we don't do it, it's going to go in landfill. So let's all recycling if they're very green, and yes, let's get out there and archive it. And does Sandra Bell appear in this kind of book?
She's written a brilliant introduction, which describes the beginning of the Clarion, why she did it and how it happened. She's always been a good writer, and it's still there. You know, the quality is still there. There are some. We've got Jonathan Porritt is in our. It has an article in our book. We talk about Roger Deakin. We've got one or two other. Simon Loftus, of course, MBE, has got a story in there. Quite a few people, and we've lots of references to named famous people of Suffolk and Norfolk.
Yes, fantastic.
So it's a bloody good buy.
It's a bloody good buy. Well, 15 quid. It's actually a very good buy. So yes, well,
post and packing. I'll tell you.
I know your post office is going to be very happy, aren't they? Yeah. But well, look, thank you ever so much for this, John. I'm so pleased. And if you want, I could, I'll put it on the Future Radio, but also I can always give you a link, and then you can put it on your website that you've got here.
That would be great.
As another incentive for people to hear the story. And hopefully we'll shift the 200 by September. You're probably going to do that quite easy, actually, aren't you? So, yeah, well, thank you for your time. It's been amazing.
David, thanks very much for asking me on. And I'm somewhat fearful of what my colleagues are going to think of the way I've described things, but the link would be very important.
Yes, well, I will give you the link. Then it'll be great to see it get pushed out and out into the wild. So, do you? Is your website still quite usable and active? The Waveney.
Oh yeah. In fact, there will be. I've got 2 stories to go up there, which are to do with the book publication and various other stuff.
Nice.
We've got, the actual launch is on the 23rd of August at Lowestoft Library in Clapham Road, 2:00, 2:30. And if you're interested, come along because you can buy the book. And also original fairs and other gig posters will be on sale. But it's mainly about celebrating people from the Clarion world, celebrating their survival and their ability to be still alive, really.
So, well, yes, this is. I don't know. This is always, if you're still in it, you do it. Now, did you a few years ago bring out a book on the coypu as well? Was there a publication with all those cartoons in, or is that?
Oh, there was, yeah, a brilliant one by Peter Milne called Coypu Compendium.
Has that all been sold out now?
I don't know whether it's been sold out. But it is a very good book. It's pretty much everything that Mick and his colleagues, which include Boren, produced over whatever period. It's a very good book, and again, it's part of the legacy of that time, as is Rob Harris's book, which I can't remember the title of at the moment, but that's all about his inflatables company.
Oh, yes. I did an interview with him, I think, it might have been this year.
Yeah.
I know, terrible memory. But yes, I've seen that, and that is amazing. So, yes, that is a
Yeah,
fantastic...
so I mean, it'd be quite nice to put them all together on a bookshelf and say that was a period of time where certain things happened, and here's the record.
So on the 23rd, Lowestoft Library. So have you
And
have you got...
then we're moving on to, or whoever wants to will go to our local community cafe called the Mayfly in the High Street, where there'll be a bit of music and some local beers to drink.
Yes, and is everyone sort of... It's got some amazing pictures of then and now. Are most of the people who are still alive going to be coming along?
We hope so. And some are RSVP'd.
Yes.
So the team will be there, the Clarion crew.
The hardcore. Yes. Well, look,
I'm absolutely dying to go to the loo. So can we?
Yes, let's say goodbye.
Yeah.
I know this. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, thanks a lot, John. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Keep in touch. Bye. Indeed, that is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to John for giving me the time for that. I will put a link in the notes below how to get a copy of this publication that is just coming out in the summer of 2025. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. In the meantime, have a great week. Stay safe.